Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today on the channel I want to share with you a very insightful message I received from someone who currently resides in Lithuania. They're going to give us their insights about what's happening on the ground and how it's likely to morph into a major conflagration between East and West, possibly ratcheting up the tension between NATO and Russia and inevitably leading to a World War III scenario that nobody wants to see. But I guarantee you that you are not going to hear this level of insight on Western media that I'm going to share with you today. So please be sure, if you will, like the video, comment, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And you should know, if you're not subscribed yet, this is not our usual type of content. It's usual prepping and survival related, but lately we've become a bit of a news source. So it is what it is. But with all news sources, you gotta make sure that you're getting a multitude of sources to get the whole picture, okay? Now, I wanna first send a shout out to Mike the car guy, who accurately identified that we were in a Tesla yesterday. Yes, our company has finally decided to go electric because right now there's a lot of tax incentives to do so from the government. That's really the only reason why. But the price of gas is just too damn high, and I was sick and tired of lugging around that gargantuan Toyota Tundra that cost me $300 a pop to fill. It was like getting knifed every time I went to the pump. So yes, we have gotten a Tesla, and I can tell you guys, it's like going from a rotary phone to a frickin' iPhone. It's just a phenomenal piece of technology. It's absolutely next level. It's no surprise that the price of Tesla stock is so high. It's just a absolutely giant leap forward in terms of technology. Like, until you've driven a Tesla, you just don't know. It's just jaw-dropping, okay? It makes every other vehicle on the road seem like a primitive piece of crap. Sorry, but it's the truth. ICE vehicles are just on their way out if we can dial this nuclear power thing in. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to have to censor various parts of this email because I don't want to out the person. I want to preserve their anonymity, but I also want to provide enough context before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video. So the juicy parts are towards the end. So you got to stick with me through the context, but it's very important if you want to understand the history of the region. To understand how this situation is about to develop, you need to understand the history. Now, if you didn't know, as you can see here on the screen, Baltic-Lithuania war drums, we will impose further sanctions on Kaliningrad. They are about to ratchet up the blockade. So right when we thought that they were about to dial it down, they're actually going to be adding more, or imposing more, enforcing more sanctions that have been imposed by the EU, I should say. Okay, so this is from an American expat who has lived in Lithuania for 7 years. Okay, they come from a very distinguished profession, that's all I'm going to say, and they're on the other side of 50. Currently married to a Lithuanian, moved here for peace and quiet to prep and homestead in an affordable place away from the craziness of the US. So that should tell you a lot right there. Now, they go on talking about how Russia is not as it's depicted in Western media. The reality of Russia, they say, is quite different that most people in the West think, and in fact, it is quite like Lithuania. I liken it to America in the 1970s. Some of the bad, but most of the good things of that time in America. Faith, family, neighborly, hardworking, and grounded. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of character context before we dive into this message. For the most part, your analysis over the past month have been spot on. Even my husband has been impressed, who speaks fluent Russian and follows both sides of the story quite closely. Remember, they currently reside in Lithuania, which is on the opposing side of the war, okay? Well, opposing side of the Russians, right? To understand how the Lithuanians feel, it is important to recognize that there are three distinct groups of people here. The older generation, who grew up under the horrors of Stalin, hold a great deal of old anger and hostility towards Russia due to some very painful memories. So that would be the silent generation, as it's called, before the baby boomers, right? That generation is dying out rapidly, especially since the COVID debacle. The second group is mostly baby boomers, down to about the age of 50 or so. This group is generally pro-Russian. They hold fond memories of their childhood and young adulthood in Soviet times. Contrary to popular Western belief, most people were not staring through the Iron Curtain at that time, wishing that they could be in the West. In fact, for them, life was good, though perhaps not according to our Western standards. And this is important to understand that, our standards are not the rest of the world's standards, okay? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. More than once, I have heard this group yearn for the old days when they weren't saddled with debt. Jobs and housing were stable, and they could travel freely, have paid education and vacation time, and could plan to move comfortably into retirement. Now, under capitalism, they write in quotes, many retired have had to return to work or live in significant poverty compared to their prior lives. These people would have no problem cutting a deal with Russia and have actually been suffering under EU sanctions. Many small shops and businesses have closed due to being unable to purchase Russian and Belarusian goods. Now, there's a tinge of communistic sentiment there, I guess you could say, or socialist sentiments, which perhaps harkens back to their fondness of the Soviet era. Of course, that's going to bring in a wide variety of political debates, but we're not going to go there, okay? We're just going to try to understand the world through their eyes. The third group are fully westernized younger generation who do not remember prior to 1992, after the Berlin Wall fell pretty much, and pretty much don't care either way. They believe most Western propaganda and are quick to believe all things Ukrainian are good and fair and just fly the Ukrainian flag as a matter of a fad. The West is good and honest, they believe, and without any corruption. No worries, I just want to make my money, buy a bigger TV. In their view, it's kind of sad. Our leaders are a different story, however, and it's quite clear the most awake people that Lithuania is just a puppet state. And remember that if they're talking about Gen Xers, baby boomers, those are the people which pretty much run the country, so they may have this fondness towards the old Soviet way of doing things. So this person says. They moved from the Soviet Union directly into European Union. It is the plight of a small country, no real control over our lives. Many people have resigned themselves to change, being in the future. They are not in denial, but can't change anything, so they don't lose sleep over it. Prepping, on the other hand, it becomes more self-evident. Inflation is significant and the shortages are real. Now, getting into the meat and potatoes here. Regarding these sanctions, the Russian perspective is important. From a legal perspective, this is a blockade, and a blockade is a declaration of war according to international law. Think about the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s. It was declared a quarantine, not a blockade, for that reason. Now, I don't know if that is true, but if it is, that's interesting, because I didn't know that. In addition, Russia is not buying or selling goods. It is transporting goods from Russia to Russia along a railway which was guaranteed in a 2003 treaty between Russia and Brussels prior to Lithuania becoming an EU member. These sanctions are supposed to be about buying and selling products in Europe and should not affect interstate travel along a contracted route. Thus, in Russia's eyes, it is a blockade, and that is bad news. Fortunately for us, Russia is also aware that the Lithuanian government is controlled by larger Western countries and has actually referred to them as nothing more than a barking chihuahua, in quotes. Their anger remains firmly against the powers of the West. This is not to say that we won't experience increased hardship. We are still heavily dependent on Russia for petroleum through Belarus, and I suspect this will be cut off in the coming days. But in the coming weeks, we will also see a beefed-up military in Kaliningrad, which is the exclave of Russia, and that marks trouble for the US and Western Europe. Regarding Poland, I am quite concerned for them. Russia has watched a large military buildup there of Western troops, and if pushed too far, may well just eliminate them in one fell swoop. By the way, a couple points of clarification from previous videos. First of all, Sarmat is named after an ancient people called the Sarmatians of the Scythian culture. It has nothing to do with Satan. This is in reference to me calling the Sarmat 28 nuclear missile deployment system Satan, which I guess is, according to them, a name that the US gave to them. Quite frankly, I don't believe they would ever call something Satan. I guess that would make sense. That wouldn't be very euphemistic now, would it? But that is a conversation for another time. Secondly, don't forget that these weapons are hypersonic, undetectable by the majority of U.S. missile defenses, and can be equipped with thermobaric warheads rather than nukes. However, I would argue that they're likely not going to waste such a missile just using thermobaric warheads rather than nukes. I just can't see the damage that would create would be worth it. Okay, that's something they would probably just use artillery, standard artillery for. The Russians generally don't discuss the use of nuclear weapons in their media. I would probably disagree with that a bit too. In state media, they've been pretty outspoken and vocal, and there's lots of juicy sound bites with them saying that they're going to nuke a lot of places, okay? Yes, I'm aware that they have a few times, but not usually. Okay, you're probably right about that. Having said that, though, nothing is impossible, and I fear what is to come if the West keeps poking this bear, which they will. I hope for everyone's sake that calmer heads prevail. Thanks for all you do. Stay on target. Well, I greatly appreciate the message, and if anybody else has any insights that they would like to share with the channel, feel free to either post them in the comment section below, or you know where to find me through the email on the homepage. What we're trying to do here is understand what is going on the ground through the white noise of the media in order to predict what is going to happen next, so we can strategize our next move as preppers. Because in the information age, you would think that this would be easy. You would think getting the truth would be easy. Unfortunately, nothing is further from the truth, and for that reason, we have to do some digging, because information is power. The more information you have, the less you have to do. So it's appearing as though this situation is escalating in the sense that for whatever reason, Russia is being provoked right now. Now, we're getting all kinds of mixed messages about who is winning the war. You know, the consensus on the alternative independent media end of things is that the Russians have almost won the war. This is due to a massive discrepancy in artillery power that can be brought to bear. Almost 10 times the amount of artillery rounds are falling on the Ukrainians than are falling on the Russians, and that's on a daily basis. And both sides are still incurring very significant losses, because with the help of NATO intelligence and some precision-guided systems that the Ukrainians are using, they are targeting some high-level officials. They are using their tools that they have at their disposal wisely, I guess you could say, and to exact the maximal amount of damage, whether that comes in terms of taking out various infrastructure or taking out high-ranking military personnel. So I am not of the belief that the war is entirely lost to Ukraine just yet, because I think there's, you know, this is the type of war that could be waged for a long, long time. And it's going to be a potentially endless insurrection, possibly not one of the scale that we've seen in Vietnam or Afghanistan, just due to the topography of the region not permitting something like that to necessarily transpire, but because of the fact that you have the full force of NATO and the US with a seemingly unlimited blank check to supply this whole operation. But, as many of you probably already know, the weapons are running out. The stockpiles are running low. And that means that it's going to take a while to rebuild those stockpiles. And I think that this provocation, if we want to look at it in this way, and this is one possible way it should go, I shouldn't say that this is 100%, but it appears that if the Ukrainians are losing right now significantly, that this move by Lithuania is a provocation to potentially get Russia to divide its attention, divide its forces. And but, you know, are they going to take the bait? I don't know. Or this is just what it is on the surface. Lithuania imposing EU sanctions to do their part for the EU. Unfortunately, it puts them in a very high-risk situation. And as indicated at the beginning of this message, what did she say? She said, I've always believed that the day would come that the Baltics would return to Russian control. If that is a prevailing belief there, then maybe it's not impossible. Maybe it's not impossible for a war to break out in Eastern Europe without it escalating to a nuclear situation. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and if you enjoy the video, and if you want premium survival gear that's been vetted by YouTubers, go and check out CanadianPreparedness.com. Use coupon code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.